The closer he got to the opposing team's crowd controller's location, Han was able to get an unobstructed view of the situation on the other side. Just as he was hoping, the other side was fighting off a wave, though the number of monsters was decreasing. This will allow them to deal with the oncoming onslaught that was behind Han. It would be hard for him to get past this group without alerting the other team. Han thought about whether he should try and fight the crowd controllers while they were occupied or try and sneak past. The issue was with the monsters and how they would respond to him. Getting close and fighting the enemy would be close enough where the monsters would react to him, as a reaction to the violence. This meant that he would have to weave between the monsters and the enemy, which didn't sound like a pleasant experience. Getting into combat would just drag things out, considering his constraints of not overly using his powers. He grinned at an idea that came to mind that would solve both issues. "I'll have you guys not desire to notice me," he said to himself at the two players currently fighting. As he increased his speed, he made an attempt to steer clear of them, but this time he didn't consider it as necessary. Even though Han was making a decent amount of noise, the distance between him and the two players was sufficient on top of them being affected by his abilities. He watched as the players would turn towards where he was, but then continue to look past him and deal with the immediate threat. "I may be cheating, but at least I'm putting in a little bit of effort in not being noticed," he grinned. If the players didn't have their helmets on, Han could picture their eyes not focusing on him, and any sounds he made would be put on the back burner of their minds to deal with the more pressing issue at hand. Sometimes, it wasn't the existence of power that was important, but how it was used was significant. It would have been easy for him to quickly kill the two people, even without him touching them, but such an action would cause a chain reaction of problems he would have to handle. Suspicion wasn't an emotion that just went away when it entered into a person's mind, and him using his powers too much would make people wonder how he was so skilled. Eventually, the amount of suspicion would get to a level where the only option would be to reset reality, though even he didn't know if he had that ability. If he couldn't reset reality, then this new experience couldn't be salvaged and cause him to abandon this world. "Next time, I'll make sure to fight you guys properly, but you guys have beaten us too many times. Call me cheap, but I'm not fond of seeing my teammates looking depressed after losing a game," Han thought to himself as he continued towards the guards. Compared to the crowd controllers, the guards would need to be fought head-on instead of using some type of cheat. He hoped that his immoral act earlier would give him enough time to fight the guards and touch the door. The current scene around him was identical to his side, just being a straight line in the canyon towards the door. With the CCs doing their job at keeping the monsters occupied, he didn't need to worry about fighting them and focus on the guards. Being 3 against 1, Han knew it was going to be a challenge, hence his role as a charger was reserved to the strongest member in the team. Guards had more gear on them to match their functions, to hold off the enemy and monsters at the same time, but this caused them to move slower. Their weapons were also focused on defense instead of offense, making it not as daunting of a task for him. "I'm going to have to rely on you again, partner," Han said to his sword. Compared to when he first picked out the weapon, his jackknife was vastly different, with a lot of upgrades placed on it. Before the game started, he made decisions on how his weapon should be balanced, which affected his attack method. Up ahead, he could see the 3 guards standing in front of a glowing door. Just like theirs, the door looked like a giant could fit through it. The glow was due to the guards still being alive and would prevent him from reaching his objective. Pulling out his weapon, Han opened it up to its full length and held it behind him. The 3 guards made arm motions to direct one another and prepare to engage with Han. One of the guards had giant drills on their hands, making them think of a specific video game. Another had 2 artillery cannons on their shoulders and some type of energy weapon shield. The last one had something that looked like a mixture of a tower shield and an energy weapon. They really have their close, mid, and long ranges covered, making things interesting for me. Han groaned. This team was just as good with strategy, meaning he would have to be careful with how he dealt with this group. Clamps fell down onto the ground, drilling into it, on either side of the player with the artillery cannons. Han could see the player slightly crouching and leaning forward while the barrels lifted up. "Darn it," Han said, just as he heard a concussive blast. With how close he was, he only had a few seconds to leap to one side as the ground where he was located was torn apart in a fiery blast. Quickly getting up, Han glanced at his prior location and just saw a giant hole in the ground. Not even a crater. It's a freaking hole in the ground, Han swore, as sweat could be felt on his forehead as he thought about how it would feel to take that attack. "You guys better appreciate how much I enjoy being in this world," he growled in frustration. In the back of his mind, he was picturing people either cheering or booing him on screens across the various locations where the teams were located. "I guess I'm going to have to do something about that person first." Han looked around and ran towards the guards while listening for the telltale sound of artillery approaching him. This wasn't something I wanted to show off so soon, but I guess I'll have to demonstrate the new upgrade I made to my partner. In his hand, his weapon began to glow, and Han spun his weapon until a whistling noise was heard. The sound was like the air around him being torn apart. Making a slicing motion at the guards, an invisible blade seemed to cut ahead of him. As it traveled across the ground, the dirt was kicked up and made visibility almost impossible. "Too bad it takes so long to use that new move I added to my weapon," Han muttered, though he appreciated the cone-shaped dust cloud in front of him. "I really lucked out at acquiring that item." It was at that moment that he heard another loud blast from the cannons, cheating his vision. He saw that the explosion would completely miss him. As he continued to race towards the guards, a lot of the dust was eliminated due to the impact. There was a feeling in his mind directing him to roll to one side. At that moment, a beam of light tore through the dust cloud. Looking ahead of him, he saw one of the guards holding their shield to one side and aiming directly at him. Out of the barrel, there were arcs of energy coming off the weapon to indicate that it was recently fired. "I guess I'm dealing with you?" Han said to himself, thinking that this was just going to get even more difficult.